Welcome to the fifth in our series of Facebook Live workshops coming to you from the Right at Home studios. Today's workshop is titled, What Everyone Needs to Have in Their Care Plan. The workshop today is hosted by Right at Home and Askjaynie.com, featuring our guest speaker, Bill Walker, attorney at law, also Lindsay Franceschi of Right at Home Sacramento-Davis. Now here is your host, Askjaynie.com's Jaynie Guarnieri Dame.
Lindsay, Bill, thank you for joining me here today. This is, as you know, a series of workshops that we've been doing about senior care. And today our workshop is about a care plan and what you should have in your care plan file. So I'm going to be asking you both some questions, but I'm going to show everyone some documents that are going to go into those care plan folders. And I want to mention that after our presentation today, we're going to be handing out documents to you. If you can't be with us today, as you know, you're watching me on Facebook and maybe possibly our websites, we're going to have a link to download the Easy Care Plan documents, and you can have a checklist. So make sure you watch to the end so you can download those things. So first, we're going to be talking about medical insurance cards, a Medicare card, additional insurance cards, and like this is a supplement, and then your health drug plan. Then we're going to be talking about a HIPAA form, and I'm going to be asking these lovely people about why it's so important to have those forms. And then a POLST form, in case you don't know what one is, we're going to talk about that. So without further ado, Lindsay, you do in-home care. When you sign a client on, what kinds of documentations do you need to bring a client on so you can provide care safely?
Right. So just above just our typical service agreement, client bill of rights, that kind of thing, these are the ones that we would want to have. So the insurance card, to make sure that if we're taking someone to the doctor and they forgot their pocketbook, that we at least have copies here in the office and can assist. Also, that tells us, what insurance they have and probably what hospital they go to. The HIPAA release is very important. We need to know who we can talk to as far as the family. You can't just assume because they're a family member that our client wants them to be able to have access to their health information.
Right.
And then, of course, the POLST is very important. We're there left alone with the clients, for long periods of time. And if there was a medical emergency, we would need to know how to proceed. So if they had a DNR, that's something we really need to know so that we don't have the paramedics, do that full treatment. So very important.
Right.
And usually people are putting that on the fridge. So.
Right. Or on the back of their door. Well, like the front door, the back door, it's usually posted there because you're not there in all cases 24/7. So we want to have something on the door so that if someone does, so everybody knows coming in and out. So Bill, what I want to talk to you about is the healthcare proxy. That kind of ties in with all this, but we'll talk about the POLST form and the HIPAA form, but first about a healthcare proxy. What exactly is a healthcare proxy? Because I'm sure if they don't have a POLST, you would need the healthcare proxy as well.
Well, a healthcare directive or proxy, some people will call it a durable power of attorney for healthcare. It's basically a document that would allow someone to make a medical decision for somebody else. So it's a good part of an overall estate plan. Everyone should have, no matter what other planning they have, a healthcare directive is very important to have. So in it, you typically list people to act on your behalf. If you've named specific people, it is functioning as a durable power of attorney. If you just say what your wishes are and you're silent about who can carry out those wishes, it's not a durable power of attorney. It's a healthcare directive only.
Right.
So it's better to make it where it's both. And we call it generically, we'll just call it an advanced healthcare directive typically. So in those documents, you'll state, okay, I want the following 3 or 4 people, usually in this order of preference, to act on my behalf.
Right.
Anyone named can serve and can act if, say, the first person named can't be located and the person's in the hospital and a decision has to be made and the second person is there, they can act. But the idea of having a hierarchy is to ensure that someone's in charge. If the 4 people are there and they're disputing what to do, theoretically the doctor is going to look to the person named highest on the list.
Right.
The document's also going to set forth what your wishes are.
Right.
A lot of people confuse healthcare directives with the post form or other forms of DNRs, do not
Right.
resuscitate orders. Think of the healthcare directive as a very broad document. It deals with all medical issues.
Okay.
It does deal with end of life, like a post form might, but instead of being only about that,
Right.
it's about any kind of medical care. So it's not really something that only an elderly person or an ill person should have.
Right.
Right.
That's very
All of
important.
us.
That's very
Anybody
important.
18 and over, no one has automatic rights to take care of your medical needs.
Right. So, okay, so that being said, typically if someone's under the age of 18, their parents are usually the go-to
Right.
to make medical decisions. But once you turn 18, a healthcare proxy is really valuable. You never know. You could have a car accident, you could have a stroke, anything at any age. So let me ask you this, because I have a lot of people that ask me this all the time. If I want to do a healthcare proxy, do I have to ask the person if they want to do that? Or if I know that person and trust that person, can I name that person knowing that that person is in like-minded and we've had conversations, and then just name that person on healthcare? Or do you recommend me having that conversation with the person that I want to trust my life with and make sure they understand?
Yeah.
Because my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that once you have a healthcare proxy, that person who is the durable power of attorney, if that person decides at the last minute that they don't want to watch you die and they go, no, do something for them. Is that true, or is that just in my mind?
Well, first of all, I would always recommend that if you're going to name someone in a document, whether it's a medical or a
They know.
financial document, that they know
Yeah,
about it.
yeah,
There's no law that says you have to, but if they don't even know their name, they may not know the document exists or where it's at.
right,
So a healthcare directive, we recommend always to give it to, have your original in your binder when we do an estate plan. It's one of many documents,
Right.
but we always make extras of those and say anyone named
Should have a
copy.
right,
You should have a conversation with them because, the language in the document is typically, most people want the kind of language that says to the effect, if I'm in a life-ending situation, there's no reasonable hope for recovery, I do not want to be kept alive artificially. Now, I'm paraphrasing several
Sure.
paragraphs, but most people want that kind of, people will euphemistically call it the pull the plug
right,
language,
right,
where you're
Yeah.
giving someone the ability
in the biz.
Right.
to say no more care.
Right.
right,
But, that's, just language in a document. What do you really mean by that? What are your goals and your aspirations? And so the
Right.
more that the person or the people that you've named, the more they know
right.
what you want and understand you, the better.
They're
So
gonna
I
be
think
able to
that you
carry
should
that out.
talk always
Right.
with the people that you've named.
Right. So going back to, we were talking about earlier, the post form, that's more of a life-ending document that we want to have. But I want to, go back over to how the HIPAA form works in conjunction with the durable power of attorney for healthcare. It's really important to have a HIPAA form for the purposes of talking with doctors, even a pharmacist. If you can't go in and ask what medications or talk about the medications unless you have a HIPAA form, and people don't understand how important this document is. And that goes in conjunction with a durable power of
Yes.
attorney, correct?
Correct. When we do an advanced healthcare directive or durable power of attorney for healthcare, we put a HIPAA release right on top of it. Ours is 3 pages. It's fairly detailed. Many of our clients sign HIPAA releases for other people. They may not always match up exactly. That's not necessarily fatal. You never want to have more than one healthcare directive because every time you do one, it's going to say in it that you're revoking any prior ones.
Right.
So you want to be careful not to just have, say, the hospital give you a fill-in-the-blank healthcare directive.
Right,
and say,
right.
"Fill this
That
out."
happens a
Right.
lot.
If you've already put one in place.
If you already put one
yeah.
in place, you want to have that one. Do a new one only if you really mean to. HIPAA release, you're going to be asked to sign those maybe in different settings.
Right.
But better not to have lots of those, but they're not necessarily going to conflict. What ours is going to do is going to say that anyone named in my healthcare directive, and in fact, anyone named in any of my estate planning documents, my trust, my will, my power of attorney, anyone named in those documents who's trying to take steps on my behalf, I authorize medical personnel to provide information to them because sometimes, for instance, a trustee of a trust cannot act until a doctor says the person's incapacitated.
Right.
So how do we find that out? We have to talk to the doctor.
Right.
So it's important to have the HIPAA release be clear about who can
Before,
receive
yeah.
information. And then I put in all of my documents HIPAA release-like language in the document itself, and then I add the release on top of it. So the
Right.
two really work hand in hand, and it kind of covers, the HIPAA release kind of covers a number of documents.
Okay. And do you, when you do your HIPAA form, do you have them? I know when we do it, and you can just say yes or no. When we do it, we put on all medical personnel are able to talk to
Right.
all of the Askjaynie staff,
Right.
and that way we're covered. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
who talks to the medical professionals.
I mean, I think as a non-medical, we do talk to the probably medical staff less, and it's more the family. But absolutely, if we're dealing with someone that
at the
doesn't
hospital discharge
really
plan or
have
something,
a lot,
right?
yeah, a family, we're going to be that person.
Yes,
So we
yes.
definitely need to
Okay.
be authorized. So.
Okay, so now I'm going to jump back over to this form.
Yes.
And you mentioned that this form is more life ending, the end of life planning.
Right.
And a lot of people misunderstand this. So I'm going to let you kind of just talk briefly about what's on it and explain it.
Okay. The healthcare directive will talk about end-of-life issues, but again, it talks about any kind of medical issue. Let's say someone's unconscious, they need surgery, they're not going to die likely, they just can't speak for themselves. Healthcare directive covers that. But it also does cover end-of-life issues. And a post form is a form of do not resuscitate order, or DNR. It's kind of the more common one now. It's pink, and like you said, people hang it up on the wall or the door, the refrigerator. Paramedics and what have you are trained to
Look
Look
in those
for it,
spots,
right.
This deals with basically what would you want to have happen if you were in end of life situation, if you were to go into cardiac arrest, for instance. And it's a check the box sort of form. It's one that you do with your doctor. The problem with these is sometimes people think, well, I've had 50-year-old healthy clients that say, well, why don't I just do one now? I'm like, well, you're not dying right now, so you don't necessarily, if you fell
No,
over
but, yeah.
here in
Right,
my office,
right.
you probably want to be resuscitated. So you have to be careful. This is something that you do
Yeah.
when you really
Yeah.
don't want to be resuscitated.
So when you're older, when you say, or actually, I'm going to take a step back. If you're a younger person, such as like ourselves, if we had a
thank you.
stroke, yes. Hey, I'm older than you. So, if I had a stroke, I wouldn't necessarily want to fill that out unless I had like a really bad stroke and maybe it included a heart attack or something like that, and I just don't want to go through this again. If this happens, I don't want. But in the case of a senior who's had multiple trips to the hospital and who has and they're failing health, that's a good document to have, especially if they don't have a trust, which we're going to talk about that. A trust or a durable power of attorney, that's like a go-to easy thing so that we're covered, right? And it has a spot on there for who's your go-to person, who's your durable power of attorney, who do you want to name like right now to speak for you. So that's a good, overall one in a pinch. And a lot of our seniors, as you know, don't have a plan at all. And that's why we're here talking about the things that we should have.
Nothing at all, and they're in a life-ending situation. They've had a medical emergency that's led to them being unable to recover. The doctors are saying there's not much more we can do,
Right.
and they don't have any planning. This is better than nothing, and this is good to have in conjunction with other documents. So the thing about it is they check the box. The first section is Section A. It has two options. Either you say, I want CPR, or I don't. Well, think through that. In the healthcare directive, most clients tell me, if I'm in such a condition, I would not want that.
Right.
But then sometimes they come along and check the, I do want that on here. So now you have a conflict between the documents, which may make sense in the moment. You may be saying, yeah, if I get so bad that I fall under the categories discussed in my healthcare directive, then this could be changed, or someone could overrule and say discontinue or don't do CPR. But at this moment, I would want it.
Yeah.
Well, then that's fine. But usually, in a lot of situations, the person would probably want this to say, do not attempt. And then the options of, there's three options regarding medical interventions: comfort only, limited intervention, or give me every possible treatment you can. Well, if you say give me everything that's out there.
Right.
Any kind of
treatment.
possible treatment, surgeries, CPR, break my
Mhm.
ribs if needed, don't worry about anything.
Right.
Well, that's probably, and for many people, going to conflict with what they've said to people, what they've said in a healthcare directive.
Right.
So, to the extent possible, you plan in advance. You do this form later in life, not
Right.
when you do your healthcare directive, and you
Right.
try to make sure that they
Right.
line up with
Right.
one
And
another.
just to be clear, right, because I have clients that have said, well, yes, I have a DNR, but, you know, if I'm like just choking on something, you know,
Yeah.
like trying
Right,
to save
right,
me,
right, right.
So I guess being clear and being specific on those things is so
Right.
important, because if you're choking and we don't know what you're choking of, but you've got a DNR, we're going to say, well, okay, we can't perform those procedures on you, but
Right.
let's be sure,
Right.
because
Right.
otherwise it could be the Heimlich and you're good.
Right.
Yeah,
So
Exactly.
You can certainly have
Like,
situations.
that would be tragic.
Yes.
We're always still dealing with people. We're dealing with people making decisions, whether they're medical professionals, family members, or whatever. What I try to tell people is it's not like documents are going to make everything work perfectly. Nothing in life does, but at least it gives someone the ability to understand your wishes. So do a healthcare directive, adjust it to your liking,
Yes.
revise it if your mind changes
Yeah.
over time, and then make sure that the people that you want acting on your behalf understand what your wishes are. And you know, if somebody is in a kind of a life-ending situation, but they have something happen that's not going to kill them,
Right, right.
I don't think medical providers are even looking for the documents at that time.
Right.
Somebody falls and they cut their knee and they're bleeding. I
Right.
don't think anybody's going to say,
Right.
well, don't put a bandage on that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's people worry sometimes about, well, geez, I don't want to be left and not treated. And I
Right.
think the idea is you'll be treated for things that can be fixed.
Yes.
But if you were to
Of natural causes.
yeah, cardiac
Right.
arrest,
Right.
you've stopped breathing. It's the third time this has
To
happened.
keep you alive on a machine or
And
something.
now
Right.
they can bring you back maybe one more time. You're going to be on a machine again, or
Maybe
continue to be
brain
on a machine, and you're still going to pass
Right.
relatively soon. That's the time when this really
Right.
matters.
Well, on that form too, I'm just going to hint to because I can't read that far away. The thing that I see on here is the artificial administered nutrition. And when I talk to my clients, and you know, let me know if this is something that you do when you're doing the trust and setting up the complete package. It has no artificial means of nutrition, including feeding tubes, trial period of artificial nutrition, including feeding tubes, long-term artificial nutrition, including feeding tubes. Typically, when I talk to my seniors, and a lot of my clients are your clients, if someone's in their 90s, I tell them not to check the long-term artificial nutrition feeding tube, because that's actually the surgical one where they put in your stomach, and it's like an act of Congress to get that removed.
Yeah.
And so when I tell people that have had a stroke, or they're having difficulties, maybe aspiration pneumonia, something like that, that the feeding tube, the NG tube or an IV feeding tube, that's a temporary thing, and that just helps them regroup and get back together and see if that can actually help them
Not just to
recover from a
sustain
stroke.
yeah.
You don't want to plan to sustain and keep that on forever, but yes, if there's a chance that you can recover from a stroke, and trust me, I know and have lots of clients, as do you,
course.
that come home from the hospital and get rehab and are able to speak again and walk again and do things with minimal assistance. So that's a really important thing, is to make sure that they understand, and I have to explain that. Do you go into that with them as well, or?
Yeah, with many of my clients are younger, and so we probably spend less time on that than we
Right.
would with a
Right.
client where this might be more of a current issue. But that middle box on that, the one that says trial basis, my healthcare directive, kind of my default,
Right.
has language in it that would say things like, I want things to be tried, within reason.
Right.
Again, I'm paraphrasing, but I want my doctor in consultation with the people I've named and the people I've named to make the decisions about it. But my wish would be, yes, if something might help me, give it a try. But I
Sure.
just don't want long-term, permanent.
Right, and
I'm
that's
being kept
so
Most people
important.
only
That
because of a
yes,
machine. I've rarely had. I just had one yesterday though, where a client did his healthcare directive early this year, and he passed just
Oh,
in May.
wow.
Knew he was dying,
Yeah.
but his wife wanted the healthcare directive in what I will call the typical way, where she does not want all that extra treatment, and he wanted it to be specific, that he wanted every possible thing. and she described what he then went through because of that. And
Oh,
I
man.
don't think most people would want that, but he did, and I altered it for him, and it didn't. He still passed, and it didn't go particularly well because the doctors probably. I asked, did they see the healthcare directive, and she said, yeah, and then that's why they kept trying. He was brought back 3 or 4 times,
Oh,
and
my goodness.
so it's not for me to tell somebody what's right or wrong. It's up to the person.
And having knowledge and information and what your doctor, I think,
The
Right,
doctor's
right.
guiding your
Yeah.
agents, but I've had a handful in 25 years of doing this that want every possible treatment.
Yeah.
Almost everybody says they don't. And, people will talk about things they hear on TV. A lot of people are too young to maybe remember the Terry Schiavo case
Right.
in Florida, but that's one where this kind of brought national attention to this kind of an issue.
Right.
And being prepared, being as prepared as you can be,
Right.
and giving the people that you want in charge the right tools.
Yeah.
Think of the healthcare directive as your voice.
Right.
And
When
so
you
if
don't
that
have-
post form is needed,
Mm-hmm.
but hasn't been done yet, and you're not, as is often the case, you're not in a position to do it then.
Yeah.
Remember, the healthcare directive gives someone the power to do the post form for you.
Correct.
So that's
Right.
that's why it's so important. They really do tie together.
Right. So, okay, so on the healthcare proxy, how often would you recommend a senior or any person, myself, to update that healthcare proxy? How, every 10, 15 years, what?
Well, I've done this, like I said, going on 25 years now, and I have made blanket recommendations several times because of some legal changes. For the most part, they can last and last. When HIPAA came out, I recommended that everybody come in and let's add some HIPAA language in the document and add a HIPAA release. When HIPAA became revised itself, we expanded our HIPAA release, our general 3-page HIPAA release. But I think just with any estate planning document, I think everyone should every year or two take stock in what you have, read through it, refresh your own memory. What is it that I'm saying is going to happen to me and my
Yeah,
things if
right.
I die,
Right.
if I become incapacitated? It's not the type of thing where you're likely to change it yearly or
Right,
even every
right.
5 years, but several times in a lifetime if done right. An 18-year-old should have some basic estate planning documents, and typically when you get married and start having kids, you do a more complete plan. A divorce, if that happens, of course, changes your plan.
Yeah.
And then often in later life or your spouse passes, those are kind of life events that drive it more than time.
Right, okay. I'm just wondering if a healthcare proxy ever expires. If I filled one out 20 years ago, and something happened to me today, because I'm still young like you,
Yeah.
if that happened, would that 20-year-old healthcare proxy still work?
Well, the simple answer is yes,
Okay.
unless by its terms or by the law in effect at the time. There were
Okay.
in the past, and I can't remember exactly when that changed. HIPAA used to have to expire after a certain period of time.
Oh, okay.
I think now they don't need to.
Right.
Healthcare directives, a lot of them, when I started doing estate planning, they had clauses that said, and I believe there was a statute then that said, they're good for 7 years. That's not the case any longer.
Right.
However, a person can say in their healthcare directive,
For
it
a
can
7
limit
year,
it.
Okay.
So be careful about that. Look at, if you just assume that it's good forever, it may not be because the term in it. And a lot of people, they go have this done by an attorney, but maybe don't really pay as much attention to it as they should and don't really know what's in there. So reading it again, getting advice, bringing it up to date. Certainly if you haven't done documents for a decade or more,
time to look at it
time
again.
to look at
Yeah.
it. Things have changed.
Well, and people change their feelings on things too,
That's
right?
right.
I mean,
That's right.
life experiences. I mean, I know that even working in this industry has probably changed the way I think about
Planning.
for my
Oh,
for my
definitely.
own.
And children, adding children to the
Well,
faction
the
and things
people
like
that
that.
you've named change. They grow up. They become
True.
elderly. Your kids who can't be named when they're
Yeah,
small
now,
children.
right.
Now you probably want
Exactly.
them to be in place instead of your sister or your best friend or something who is getting older as you are. So, it's again, life events drive estate planning changes more than time alone.
Okay.
But safe to say that if a decade's gone by, it's time to bring things up to date.
I want to move on to financial power of attorney. And I know, Lindsay, in your situation with having to deal with adult children planning for their senior loved ones and having care, you want to know who's going to be able to pay the bills.
Right.
And so a financial durable power of attorney, I feel, is probably one of the most important
Who's gonna
documents
handle their affairs?
to have. And I wish seniors weren't so secretive about their finances. A lot of times as a geriatric care manager, they'll tell me more than they'll tell their adult children.
Yeah.
So it becomes a hassle when that person goes in the hospital, they have bills, they have a house payment or whatever payments, and they're in the hospital and no one has that financial power of attorney. So it's important for you guys to get a copy of that so you know you're going to get paid, as well as that their bills are going to be paid. So for me, having that durable power of attorney is huge. And what if the person doesn't go home? What if the person, we try to get them to go home as often as possible with in-home care, and that's what we want. But some of them don't go home, and we want to know where the money is going to come from. So having a durable power of attorney financial. Now, there's a couple of different types. There's one that you mentioned earlier about you need 2 doctors to say they're incapable or incompetent or something. And that's like, nowadays, I can tell you, that's like pulling teeth to get 2 doctors to say that. For some reason, they don't want the liability. They think that, something's going to happen. And as we all know, when a senior goes into the doctor hasn't seen that patient maybe but once a year. And seniors with dementia can fool the best of them, and they can go in and look like they are alert and oriented when they really aren't alert and oriented, and that's hard to get that doctor to say, yeah, they have dementia. A hospital stay, sometimes the hospital staff will label them with dementia, but that's still not good enough because then that doctor won't say. So I know that there's that regular durable power of attorney that says you have to be incapacitated. Is there another durable power of attorney, more general, that says that, and I'm sure that you'd have to really trust the person that you give that to,
Right.
but one where it's easier for the family to access those funds? And can you kind of just tell us about a financial durable power of attorney?
Okay, so on the financial side, there's 2 basic documents that will help someone else take care of your financial matters during life. One is the power of attorney, one is a trust. I'm going to talk about them kind of together in a sense. A trust just is a way that it does more than a power of attorney. It's a way that not only can someone manage the assets that are in the trust while you're living, but at your death, the assets in the trust can pass outside of the trust to your heirs without going through probate. So it can keep things out of the court system at death, and it can avoid the need for a conservatorship if you become incapacitated. A power of attorney works with that because even if you have a trust, if you don't have a trust, you should at least have a power of attorney.
Right.
If you have a trust, you should still have a power of attorney because not all assets are going to be in your trust, either by design or because the law says they can't be. Like an IRA, for instance, can't be in your trust while you're living. So the power of attorney controls that. But the person you name is going to act under both of those documents concurrently. Now, how do they step in? There's 2 ways. You alluded to what we call a springing power. And most people, a younger person, middle-aged person, they're fine. They can handle their own affairs. They're going to have springing powers. It doesn't have to be 2 doctors. I do 1 now because of the problems with that. But there's a triggering event. And what I generally say is the doctor says I'm incapacitated. A court says I'm incapacitated. And I just step aside. I say I'm not incapacitated, but I'm going to resign. That allows the person to step in. Then we have opportunities to do what are called immediate powers, and that's what you're talking about. So when I have a senior client particularly, or an ill client, someone who maybe isn't incompetent, but they really are not able easily to handle their own affairs, I encourage them to consider naming that person that they have as their successor on their trust, make them a co-trustee so they're with them on the document, or perhaps just step aside and let them be the trustee. And on the power of attorney, we recommend that they go from a springing power to an immediate power. Now, they go to use that power of attorney, and the first thing the bank is going to say, or the broker is going to say, is, where's the doctor's letter? So I have to work with that agent or that trustee and explain, don't let them deny you, because right here it says this is immediately effective. It's not springing. Springing meaning triggered upon an event like
Right.
incapacity.
Right.
And incapacity is an awkward trigger. It's not like a light switch, as you know. It's people aren't necessarily clearly incapacitated or clearly not, or you might have trouble getting a doctor to declare that they are. So someone who needs some active help but maybe isn't incapacitated should think about making those things immediate,
Right.
and therefore the person named can then act. And even if they meet some resistance with legal help, they can get around that resistance and be able to pay the bills,
Right.
access the accounts, deal with the house and all of that.
And that's why it's important for you guys to have that document. When you bring somebody on services, you don't ask for a copy of the whole trust. You just ask for a copy of the durable power of attorney for finances showing that someone now is going to be responsible
Right.
to pay those bills, correct?
And we also have them as like a backup financial responsible person on
Right,
the
okay.
service agreement.
Okay.
So they're signing that as well.
Okay.
And if they have a trust, probably third parties dealing with a senior or anybody that has a trust and a power of attorney, you would need the whole trust, but having a copy of the certification of trust, which is kind of a short version,
Right.
and then a copy of the power of attorney, because if they have to pay, so let's say the eldest son is the trustee and the agent under the power of attorney, he might be making payments out of a trust account. Well, that the power of attorney really has nothing to do with that. The trust does, but you might be making payments out of a checking account that was allowed to stay outside of the trust. That's where the power of attorney would come in. So the documents really work, collectively together.
Right.
And a lot of times people do confuse documents and,
Right.
and refer to them incorrectly,
Right.
but having them all together makes
Right.
sense.
So I'm just going to summarize the trust. It works in conjunction, hand in hand with a durable power of attorney. But if somebody doesn't have a trust, a really important document to have in your care plan is a durable power of attorney for financial.
Definitely.
So that person, so that would be another document that would go in a care plan.
Right.
So now we have the medical cards, we have the healthcare proxy, which is the durable power of attorney for health. We have a HIPAA form. If they're senior, maybe really, really close to the end, a POLST form. If they don't, especially if they don't have a healthcare proxy, a financial power of attorney. Now, you talked about a trust. People say, well, I don't need a trust. I have a will. Okay, so depending on, we had this conversation a little while ago. What is the difference between a trust and a will? Who would be best fitted for a will and who would be best fitted for a trust?
Okay. First of all, when you do have a trust, you still do a will.
Okay.
And the will is a special kind of a will called a pour-over will. Pour like P-O-U-R. And think of it
Like
as a
pour.
safety net. So you're pouring over to your trust. So if you die and you have a trust and you have assets in that trust, they pass by the terms of the trust. They don't have to be overseen by a court.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
But let's say you buy a house after you create your trust and you forget to put it in. Well, that asset now is going to be governed by your will.
Okay.
But this will is not going to be a will that says I leave it to these people. It's going to leave it to your trust. So that in a worst case scenario, even if the will has to be probated, it's not going to have to be probated for all of your assets,
Right.
just those
'Cause
missing,
it'll go.
and the missing assets will end up in the trust.
Okay.
If you do just a will, if it's not a pour-over will, it's like that's the only document, you don't have a trust. Think of it as an expression of your wishes to a court. It doesn't make anything happen automatically.
Right.
The person who's called an executor, who you name in the will, to step in, he or she cannot just start transferring things. They have to go to court, get permission, and the court oversees the process. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's time-consuming,
Lengthy.
cumbersome, and kind of a hassle, and expensive.
Yeah.
A trust is like a will, in that it says, when I die, here's where I want my things to go. But the person named in that document is called a trustee. Unless there's a problem, like somebody's fighting over it, which sometimes happens, but not as much as people sometimes think. But a trustee can wrap up, and it's called trust administration. It's very similar to probate, but it's not done in court. So it's faster and less expensive in most cases. So having a trust, who needs one? Anyone that has a house or any real estate really should be in the trust.
Right? Yeah.
If you have assets under $150,000, comfortably under, like you're not likely to go over.
Right.
If you have no real estate, if you're elderly and you're not likely to change your assets, you're not going to buy a house again or anything like that, then a will is probably enough, because there's a procedure to pass along a small estate, which is deemed under 150 without real estate, without probate anyway. So you might not need a trust in that scenario. But what if you might inherit from somebody, or things do change, and so I always ask enough questions to know whether a trust might still be advisable. But definitely, if the person owns a house or has other assets that exceed $150,000 and are likely to continue to do that, a trust makes sense. And doing things to avoid a trust, like putting all your kids' names on your house and on your account, and relying solely on joint tenancy arrangements or beneficiary designations, those are quick, easy ways to deal with small things, but a very dangerous, bad way to deal with real estate, to deal with large accounts, for reasons that we could spend another hour talking about. But anybody with real estate or more should consider having a trust.
Okay. So in the case of in-home care, if they're taking care of someone in that house that's in the will, and the senior is passing or going to pass, they need to know who's in charge and all of those things. So that either a will, the trust and the financial durable power of attorney, those are key. When someone doesn't have, say someone's on Social Security, limited income, lives in an apartment, doesn't even own a car, but they have like personal little knickknacks, is that where they do like a holographic will, where they just write out what they want, or is that even needed at that point?
I think all people 18 and over should have 4 basic documents: a will, a power of attorney for financial matters, an advanced health care directive, and a HIPAA release.
Okay.
Even if you just have personal effects, your will can say where you want those to go. Your will can refer to something outside of the will, what we call precatory instruction. If you don't want to itemize things, or you might change your mind about things, you can say, for instance, I leave all of my effects, whatever they are, whether it's cash or jewelry, artwork, I leave it all to my kids equally, subject to a precatory instruction. That's a document that you could do yourself. We give our clients a form for it, where you might say, I want my grandson to get this pocket watch, and I want my granddaughter to get this necklace.
The specifics.
So that's not a binding gift. If you wanted to make it binding, you put it in the will, but it's an easy way to deal with small things.
Right.
And then and anything that's not listed, the will says disperse it. Now, how do you disperse things? Well, the executor divvies it up, and and sometimes people argue, and 2 people want one thing, but there are ways to deal with that. But having a basic will with possibly outside of the will, a holographic will can do the same thing. The problem with people doing legal work on their own, it's not like it doesn't ever work. It's just that it doesn't always work.
Right.
And a holographic will has to meet certain requirements to be considered valid. It still has to go through probate if there's more than $150,000 in assets.
Right.
So I would exercise caution with that, but it is a way to do it.
Yeah, I have had clients who have had holographic wills, and
they were
handwritten.
The stuff they're worried about.
Exactly, they're handwritten, and it's I am of sound mind on this date, and this is what I want, and blah blah, and then they sign it, and it's like under the mattress or something. Yeah. So the whole purpose of this conversation is to tell people the things that are the most important to have in a file, so that you have that information, because you never know what's going to happen. The last thing I want to talk about is when you do a will or a trust, or we have that conversation, as do I. People don't like to talk about it, but there's end-of-life issues, and we touched on end-of-life issues with the post form. But the huge thing that I have found is that no one talks about what they want done. Do they want to be buried? Do they want to be cremated? And those are things that you guys need to know, so that if someone passes, is that correct, where they would know to, okay, this was a DNR, this person died peacefully. Of course, they have to call 911. And then, show the documentation. But then, someone, especially if there's no family, someone has to call the funeral parlor. Somebody has to do that. So those are things that we like to talk about. Well, we don't like to talk about them, but we do talk about them in a care plan. When I'm setting up a care plan with them, is to talk about those funeral arrangements. Is that part of what you put in a trust as well? Is there wishes that, or they set aside money for that? I mean, how do you have that conversation with them? Because I just say, look, let's talk about this now. It's hard to talk about, do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Where do you want to be? Those types of things. And the seniors will tell me, but they won't tell their adult children.
Yeah. Well, the document that deals with post-mortem issues like burial, cremation, autopsy, organ donation is the healthcare directive. Most power of attorney ends when a person dies. A will begins when a person dies. A trust keeps going, and a healthcare directive keeps going for a brief time to wrap things up. The person named in the healthcare directive can make those final arrangements. My default is to say in my healthcare directive is my agent is authorized to authorize an autopsy if necessary. My agent is asked to carry out any wishes I have with regard to organ donation, provided that I have stated those wishes in another legally binding document. The reason I went to that is when I started to say what their wishes were in that document, I would have clients that would do something different on their driver's license. And that's what everyone really looks to. So I reference, so basically I'm giving the person the power over the decision making, but tying it to what they may have done in another document, which would be a driver's
The little
license.
pink sticker on your driver's license.
Right.
And then regarding final arrangements, it says my agent is entitled or authorized to make my final arrangements in accordance with my wishes, however known. Now, I can go on. Some clients will tell me, put in there that I want to be cremated. I want to be buried at this place. I want no service. I want whatever. And I'll put it right in the healthcare directive.
Right. That's really important to have. So
Many times they don't know, though, or they don't get into it there. But then I'll say, okay, just like we talked about the precatory instruction regarding tangible personal effects, I tell them, okay, this healthcare directive gives these people the ability and the legal authority to make those arrangements. Now make sure they know what you want.
Yeah.
It might be that with your packet in your binder that we give them, maybe you have the prepaid documentation that you signed up at Neptune Society for cremation.
Right.
Well, that would be a pretty good indicator of what your wishes are.
And you would need that.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm seeing more of it, and I'm hearing more of it, that everyone thinks, my loved one has passed, now it's time to do things, which, you're grieving.
No.
I mean, it's just really not the time. And so I've been working a lot more with people that are doing the live planning.
Yeah.
And it's
Tell
going
us.
down to the mortuary, picking out your casket, picking out the songs in your service,
right.
the food, the whatever it is. And if it were me, I would want it to be carried out exactly how I wanted, not leave it up to somebody else who's grieving and just trying to keep it all together at that time.
And I think that's a great idea. And even for people that are queasy about being that involved and actually going there, at least if you write down what you want.
Right. Well, there's some great agents now. I call them agents, but they work with funeral parlors, mortuaries, and they have programs where you can actually pay monthly when you're younger, like us.
Well,
where you can plan it and you can pay for it, so that because I'll tell you what,
bill,
I didn't have a big funeral, big everything for my mother, but it was a pricey thing to do. So honestly, it's something that you should think about and you should have that conversation. Thankfully, I had conversations with my mom about what she wanted, and she didn't want a service, and she didn't want to be cremated, and she just wanted something very, very plain and a prayer. And I had to respect her wishes, and that's how you do it, because it's, I guess some people have said to me, it's not about them, they're dead now, but it's about the respect and the trust that they put in you. They put in you to do, and their legacy. You have to respect that. You have to do what they wanted. So if you don't have that conversation, which is what I'm talking about, you have to have that conversation, and it's a hard one to have.
Well, it doesn't have to be this somber experience.
Exactly.
Either. I mean, you're going. No one's died.
You're
collectively going. Yeah, you're planning a party. You get to do it exactly how you want. Which, again, if
I want to, by the way, if anybody wants to know, I want to go to a casino and just, have me next to a slot machine. And
all right, it's here, living well. But no, I think it's really important, and just the financial part, like you said. It's
absolutely.
The mortuary person I was talking to a couple of weeks ago was saying just that. It's we get medical insurance for what might happen. He's like, this is definitely going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do we not
Yeah,
I've had
it's funny the
clients-
things that are just so normal to us,
Right.
but
Well, I've had clients and even family members where I've had to step in and help after someone has died, and people that were very together, very organized during life, and I found like, oh wow, they didn't take care of this
They didn't-
major
yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
it's like
and,
this
and I was dealing with it
out of
after
sight,
they
out of
died.
mind.
Yeah.
We're all just
Yeah.
oblivious to. We're all on the same path.
So it's something like you said. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if. It's
If,
just a
it's
matter
fine.
of when. So
When.
making sure you plan it or you give instructions to people so that they know. Another one, my dad passed recently and donated his body to science.
Right, and that's
Wow.
huge.
And,
Yeah.
and that's a very, very specific thing that he had to do well in advance,
Yeah.
and it wasn't well received by some family members.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea.
But it was
Especially if
So
there's a
too, but I
disease,
get it from the
a
family
disease
side, right?
process.
They're thinking people are like
Yeah.
dissecting dad in the class, right? That's
Right.
not something
That's
people like to think about. But if it was important to him, if he was in the science field, or just, hey, I want to have purpose after I go too,
Right.
then that's
Yeah.
his prerogative.
But for that was one where if you just mention it, it's probably not enough because
Right.
it's a very specific.
It has to be in that-
He said that, but he didn't know.
Yes.
Yeah, because you get people fighting over, but he had to sign
Yes.
paperwork himself, and
Yeah.
it was all prearranged.
I
and
think that's fabulous. I know a lot of my clients have done that, and I think it's great. Especially, I had a couple of Parkinson's patients that did that, and they felt that by doing that, they were helping research. As you said, they were helping research, and if you could help somebody else that is afflicted with that disease process, why not? I mean,
Right.
they won't want my body when it's done because I'm perfect. There's nothing wrong with it, so there's nothing to find.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
Ideally.
but if something happened to me, I would definitely donate the,
A lot
my
of
eyes and
people-
stuff like that.
I've had clients say to me the opposite of that. Oh, there's nothing worth taking.
Right.
So I don't want to be an organ donor. And my response to that is, don't be so sure.
Education.
Right.
There's many
Learning.
things that could benefit.
Exactly.
Seeing affected organs
Exactly.
is probably just as
Right.
beneficial
But
to
like,
perfectly.
even for organ donation, my understanding is like cornea, skin, and other things, even in an elderly person, can still be
Exactly.
useful.
Helpful, yeah.
So not that people should do it if they don't want to do it, but
Right.
don't.
But if they want to do it,
Yes.
and that's the point, is that
Right.
maybe if he
informed.
didn't sign and do and take the steps that he did to make that happen,
Mhm.
the kids would have probably
Yeah.
just did what they thought was the best thing, and
Right.
Yeah.
how terrible.
And so it's really important for all of us as professionals in the senior care field to know these things. And so I'm going to just recap. To start a file, we want a care plan file. And this is something that adult children should have, and they should get the medical cards from their parents and make copies, a driver's license. I didn't add that.
Make
Get
it
a
a
copy.
binder,
Just
right?
make it put a
Yeah.
little binder, a folder. I call it the care plan folder. So you're going to have your documents that you need would be the Medicare card. If you have a supplemental insurance or if you have an HMO, you want a copy of that the number's on. If you don't have an HMO, you're going to have some kind of, supporting Medigap policy and a drug policy. So you want copies of all of that. Then you want a copy of the healthcare proxy. You want a copy of a post form if that's appropriate. You want a copy of the HIPAA release. You want a financial durable power of attorney in this so that, we can make sure that you're going to get paid. A couple of things, and also a funeral arrangements, if there are funeral arrangements or their wishes, that's going to be in your file. And the reason we're doing this in a file close to wherever you live is because you might not live with mom and dad. Mom and dad, the neighbor might find mom and dad down, had a stroke, a heart attack, or whatever. You don't have time to run over there and get that information. So if you have that file at your place, in your car, wherever you think that it's important, take pictures of it, put it on your phone, but have that file because when you get to the hospital, you're going to need a lot of those
It's
forms.
helpful, and I've been there actually, right after a client had passed, and she was very prepared, and I mean, the police and the paramedics were just like, wow, this is great. It's all right here. We know who to contact, what to do, who to call for the mortuary. It was very easy in a hard situation.
To make a bad situation as as easy or as good as it possibly can be, because the death of a person is very, very difficult. Someone having a stroke, a heart attack, any of those things is very difficult. So anything that we can do, anything that we can offer you as senior caregivers, honestly, this is just to help. This is just
we
help.
don't want to make the wrong decision.
Right, exactly.
So it's important.
I just want to add a couple of other documents. As a senior care provider, if someone needs funds, and we help access veterans benefits, there's aid and attendance if someone needs help at home or if somebody needs to move to an assisted living. Other things that you want in this care plan file are the DD-214, a marriage certificate in the event that it's the spouse that needs the care, and if the spouse needs the care and their spouse is not living, they need that death certificate.
Right.
So those are 3 more documents that you want to get to put in that care plan, so that we all know. And then if there's a long-term care policy, you want that information, because a long-term care policy helps you guys a lot, and you help them access those funds.
It does. It actually, we give them password or give us the password so we can communicate, and also just making sure that they know the policy, we know the policy, because we've had situations where they thought they were covered but their daily maximum was actually like $40, which was a small percentage of it. So just everybody being in the know about that as well is very important.
And then if you don't have a trust, because my hope here is that enough information has been given to all of you that you will take a step to talk to a professional such as Bill to get a care plan in place, whether it's a trust or all those documents that we talked about, because you want to talk to a professional. I am a geriatric care manager, and I can tell you what we need, what you need, and what is going to benefit you and your senior loved one. But Bill is actually the expert at this. I know enough to be dangerous. I will admit that right now. He's the one you want to talk to. So I think we're pretty much done here, but I just want to remind everybody, the ones of you that are here today, we're actually going to give you some forms. If you're not here and you're watching this on Facebook, I want you to download we're going to have a quick checklist of all the forms that you need to have. And we'll have information about Bill, information about myself, information about Lindsay and her dad, Dan, who is hosting this for us. And I just want to thank you again for doing this. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And see you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you.